In this video, I'm going to talk about the 10 absolute worst movies of 2024. Now, this entire year has flown by. Feels like I started YouTube no more than a couple of weeks ago. I've been having a lot of fun with it, but it hasn't all been fun. I've had to sit through a couple of miserable watches, some of which I'm going to rant about today. Also, be on the lookout. I'm going to be doing a ranking video also of my favorites of the year, ranking all the movies I saw this year, then ranking all the horror movies I saw this year. So if you like this video or any of those sound appealing, be sure to subscribe down below, like the video. It all helps the channel. I love talking movies with you. Also, just as a disclaimer, these are just my opinions, not yours. If you like these movies, that's absolutely fine. We don't have to agree. Nothing personal against your taste. This is just my experience with these movies. I feel like I have to say that. I also didn't get around to seeing every single movie. You know, I heard some movies were absolutely terrible, so I didn't waste my time with them. I respect my time and money too much. I see enough movies as is. Comment your 10 worst movies of the year. What movies made you miserable you would never watch again? What movies do you want others to know are absolutely terrible to avoid or share in the agony with you? But yeah, let's get into it. Let's start off with the best of the worst, I guess. So coming in at number 10 in a movie I feel like is going to be lower on my list than a lot of people's, but I also think it's a terrible movie, so if it goes that high, whatever, I respect it. It's Madam Web. Now, the only reason this movie is not higher on this list is I just think it's a normal, boring, terrible movie. Like, there's movies on this list above Madam Web that were absolute torture to sit through. Like, I thought of walking out. This movie was just painfully boring and just a terribly made movie. So it's kind of run-of-the-mill, something I feel like I would have found on Tubi if not for the rhetoric. Because this movie got absolutely trashed by the general public, and for good reason. It feels like Sony does not care at all. This like Spider-Man-less universe they're going for between this and Craven and Morbius, absolute garbage. Just shelf it. Nobody likes these movies. There's no effort behind them. This movie was absolute trash. Obviously, you have Madam Web. She can kind of predict the future. You have this bad guy named Ezekiel Sims, and he's trying to kill these soon-to-be superheroes played by Sydney Sweeney and the others. So there's like this weird thing going on where he's trying to do these things to kill these girls, and Madam Web is just cock-blocking any fun because she can see the future. So the entire movie just plays out like Ezekiel Sims trying to kill these girls, and then Madam Web will have a vision and he'll just have them like leave 5 minutes before he gets there. And he'll show up and be like, where did everybody go? And that's the entire movie for 90 minutes, and it feels like 5 hours. Because that's really the thing with this film. It's just boring. This movie has no action to it. Really no central plot. There's no involvement of Spider-Man like all of Sony's universe. It also has some absolutely terrible editing. I mean, the audio in this movie does not match the lips. You can tell they did post-dub and they didn't even care enough to make it match. Absolutely absurd product placement, like a Pepsi Cola sign in the dead center of the screen for 3 minutes. I said no action. One of the worst actors I've ever seen cast as the villain of this, Ezekiel Sims. So yeah, this movie is an absolute pile of garbage. If you want to put it the worst of the year, I would not blame you. For me personally, this movie was just boring. This is a movie I had to pause 2 or 3 times. I watched it at home. Almost fell asleep watching this movie. That's what I would consider it, a sleep remedy. I don't know. Awful, but not painful. Coming in below that at number 9, and one of the more recent movies I watched was the B horror movie called Werewolves. Now, this movie garnered a lot of buzz on Twitter, and a lot of YouTubers were really hyping it up, saying it had a chance to be a sleeper hit. It was marketed as The Purge with werewolves. I talked to the director briefly on Twitter. Seemed like a nice enough guy. I really wanted to like this movie. It has Frank Grillo in it. Found out during my review his name's not Grillo. It has double L's. I guess my Spanish failed me. But Frank Grillo's in it. He's been in another Purge movie. I like him as an underrated actor. I feel like he carries action movies that are low budget garbage. He makes them watchable. And I also am not somebody who really loves the Purge movies. I feel like most of us don't really think they're that fantastic, but they're pretty watchable, I guess. When you combine the two, I had decent enough expectations when it comes to making The Purge with werewolves. And again, much like the movie before, this movie is just boring. It's just a direct ripoff of The Purge. They don't really do anything with the werewolves to make this movie actually watchable. It's all done practically, which I can respect, but you can tell the practicality of it is impossible to utilize because it's just dudes in giant suits, but the suits look like they're very stocky. They look like mannequins. They're not mobile. So basically all you get is a bunch of zoomed in shots of werewolves snarling. You don't really see them in action doing anything very interesting. Anything you could possibly fathom in your mind when it comes to what werewolves would be like over a night of the Purge, that is not in this movie. You have this supermoon where one night a year everybody turns into werewolves, again direct ripoff of The Purge, and it's just Frank Grillo running around on the streets trying to get back to his family. Occasionally he'll run into a werewolf, somebody will get killed, but it's done in a very meandering way. It's just very forgettable. Again, the audio in this movie is not synced very well, very low budget. I wanted to really like this one. This is one of the more painful watches I had this year. I saw it in a theater of about 10 people, 8 people left by the end of it. So use that as a litmus test, I guess. Now, coming in at number 8 in the movie that quite frankly is a lot more insultingly bad than the two below it, that is Blumhouse's Imaginary. Now, I feel like we've all had it about up to here with Blumhouse. That studio has absolutely terrible quality control. They're not even trying anymore. I cannot wait for that studio to die. Because this movie is called Imaginary, and you will never find a movie that has less imagination than this one. Feels like it was written by AI for stupid people, by stupid people, with no effort in it whatsoever, because this is a movie that's a take on an imaginary friend in the form of a horror movie that has absolutely no horror to it, has a lackluster plot, and just a movie that will make you feel like you lost almost all your brain cells by the end of it. We have this girl who writes comics or something, I forget, and she moves into this house with her family, and something in the past happened that caused like an evil entity or an imaginary friend or something to haunt that house, and it's just so stupid. The family dynamic of this is not believable at all. She cannot act at all. Anything your imagination could possibly conjure up about a movie called Imaginary is 1,000,000% more interesting than this. About 90 minutes long, feels like it's about 500 minutes long. This movie doesn't even have any semblance of scary things until the final 20 minutes. You go into this imaginary world and you start seeing a semblance of what could have possibly come with this movie. You have this warping world with this evil teddy bear, and you see snippets of it or what they could have done if they gave a shit whatsoever, but you don't get any of that. Like I said, no family dynamic, the lead cannot act, forced jump scares, boring, tropes galore of kids talking to ghosts that aren't there, drawing evil pictures that their teachers question. It's basically an AI written horror movie. I mean, this movie is so boring and so unwatchable. That's why it's this low on the list. Coming in below at number 7, and it's only fitting, it's another Blumhouse masterpiece, that is Night Swim. Now, anybody who talks to me about this movie, I make sure to let them know that the real title of the movie is Night Swing, because for some reason, half of this movie's plot is about a guy's failed baseball career, so you have Field of Dreams mixed with an evil swimming pool. Absolutely fantastic. Kind of a bold risk to take to make an evil swimming pool the main character of your film, because every single second you're not swimming in the pool, you are bored stiff. This movie, much like most Blumhouse PG-13 movies, feels like it was written by AI. Incredibly slow, 90 minutes, feels like 3 hours. And it's just about an evil entity that's haunting this family that moves in swimming pool. And when they show that entity, he looks kind of like the creature from the Black Lagoon, mixed with a melting gingerbread man in the form of absolutely terrible CGI. Also, did I tell you yet that the family moves into this house and then finds out the swimming pool is possessed? That must be a stepping stone to get every Blumhouse script passed. You have to have a family move into a haunted house. Never seen that trope before. But yeah, as I said, it should be called Night Swing. Half of this movie's flashbacks about this guy's failed baseball career. They're going for some emotional angle about how he's injured or he's sick and he can't play baseball anymore. It's like two entirely separate movies. Both sides of it are completely boring. And yeah, that's all there really is to say about this one. This one's another film that's 90 minutes long, has about 5 minutes of action. I'm not kidding, in the entire film. So if you watch the trailer, that's probably 90% of what you're going to see in this one, aside from just a swimming pool floating and scenes of baseball. So avoid this one like the plague. Blumhouse sucks. Now, coming in below that at number 6, and probably one of the more controversial opinions I'm going to have this year, that is Civil War. Now, you're probably asking, how does a movie this well made with this big of a budget end up below those movies? And I'll tell you why. Because I hated everything about this movie. This movie is so afraid to offend, it can't even accept that it's a cash grab. Because this is a movie that centers the plot around what would happen if the US had a civil war. You're not blind. If you're aware of what's going on in the world, the country is pretty divided, okay? You have a lot of people who think one way, other people who think the other. They don't see eye to eye at all. It feels like this is a premise that we could be on the cusp of if things took a dark turn. So going into this film, I was pretty interested because it's A24. They give their directors liberty to kind of do what they want. What the stance will be in this movie about a United States Civil War. How did we get there? Why are we divided? Just some rhetoric, some commentary about where we are as a country. Maybe this is just me, but when I went into this movie, I wanted it to do something, make me feel something. I didn't care about any of these characters. This movie is not a Civil War movie. It's about war journalists traveling around the country taking pictures of a Civil War. You're following these people around and they're taking pictures of the war, and it's supposed to capture how severe this would be, but you don't care because they don't establish any stakes for how we got here, what people's stances are. They even go as far as to say that California is allied with Texas, which makes this kind of a fantasy movie more than anything that could even possibly be hyper realistic. And I had a lot of people take offense to that, and they're like, you don't get the point of the movie. It's about war journalists. No, I understand the point of the movie. I think it's pointless. I don't care about that. I don't care about war journalists. I don't care how profound their images are. I care about what we could have possibly said about a U.S. Civil War. That was the intrigue. That's the way it was marketed. They straight up lied in the marketing of this movie, in my opinion. And some people will say, well, yeah, they didn't parrot what you thought. They didn't say what you thought. If you're left or you're right, they didn't say everything you wanted to hear. That's not it at all. I wanted them to say anything. This is the most spineless, ballless movie I probably saw this entire year. I have no problem disagreeing with political views if they make it a captivating story. I couldn't care less. This movie doesn't say anything. It's the most ballless movie to come out this year, in my opinion. I got absolutely nothing out of this. Cinematography's okay. Audio's okay. Everything else, utter dog shit, miserable movie. I would never even consider rewatching this. So yeah, that's why it's on this list. Coming in ahead of that at number 5 is actually The Strangers, Chapter 1. Now, this movie's basically Civil War, but it's a scary movie version of that where it's so afraid to do anything new, it's insultingly stupid. A lot of horror movie fans really like the original Strangers, myself included. It's kind of a home invasion classic, but for some reason they decided they were just going to remake The Strangers in 3 movie parts. For the first part of it, we're just going to do the exact same thing top to bottom we did in the original, just terrible, with no understanding of why the original worked. This is the epitome of what Hollywood does now. They make remakes, they make reboots, and they don't understand why the original worked. The original movie was very claustrophobic. It took place at this one cottage, and they were just tormented the entire night with the way it was framed, and they were just isolated. That was why it was so effective, along with a ton of other things. This movie starts off, you're not even in the house, you're in a diner, and you're meeting a bunch of strange locals, and you're introducing red herrings of who the strangers could possibly be. Newsflash, the strangers was scary because it could be anyone. We don't need culprits, we don't need red herrings. Just people you don't know with masks with no motive. That's what made it scary. This movie, run-of-the-mill cookie-cutter remake of the original, no interesting costume design, no interesting framing. A lot of the scares and the iconic scenes from the original are just straight up removed or yoinked from this one. So yeah, this movie just has no purpose to exist. And for me, I'm usually someone who's actually a pretty big fan of remakes and reboots if they're done well. This movie, potentially the worst remake ever with absolutely no point to it, and it also has the most disgusting eating scene of all time. This guy does not know how to eat a burger. Oh yeah, this is also probably the litmus test for how your tolerance for stupid characters is. Because this movie probably, of all the movies on this list, has the dumbest characters you will see all year. This guy with asthma, he's getting chased by a guy with an axe, and then he just pulls up a water bottle and he starts using it for air. And then you have the girl who's hiding in a closet in the dark, and then her boyfriend comes home and she's like, they're in the house. And he's like, have you been smoking weed again? And this movie was so bad, honestly, it killed all my excitement for the trilogy. So we'll see where they go. Not looking good. And now moving on to the next movie at number 4. And this is probably another one of my top 3 most controversial opinions this year. That is Blink Twice. Now this movie is an absolute war zone in the comments. And I find it hilarious because you have 2 sides. You have, you don't get it. This movie's awesome. The themes it's exploring are so profound. Other half is in my camp. This movie is dog shit, probably one of the worst of the year. This was easily top 3 most miserable watches I had this year in a movie theater. So what you have going on in this one, you have Channing Tatum playing this guy named Slater King, and basically he's been canceled. You know the ordeal. He walks around, he's on an apology tour. They don't really tell you what's going on with him, but you can imply he sexually assaulted somebody, he abused somebody. But you have this bartender or something named Frida, the main girl. She's basically obsessed with him. He invites her and her friend to come to his island, and then you have this movie kick off. You're in a big mystery of what's going on in this guy's private island. But here's the thing, there is no mystery, because right before this movie starts, they introduced you a trigger warning, and they say that this movie will be exploring the abuses of power, sexual assault, so you know exactly what you're getting into when this movie starts. The mystery is all but gone. You know exactly what this movie is going to be doing commentary on. And I had a lot of people saying to me that I didn't understand trigger warnings and that I didn't sympathize with the abused. That is not it at all. I believe it's a celebrity named Matt Smith. He says something along the lines of, he's afraid trigger warnings are going to water down material. Isn't the point of being shocked and awed so that they elicit a response, that they elicit a memory? That's where I'm at with this movie. If you wanted to make this movie and you wanted it to be impactful, remove the trigger warning so I actually have a mystery to get engaged in. but there's absolutely nothing to it. They tell you exactly what this movie is going to be, paint by numbers so that you're not offended, and the entire purpose of the movie should be to offend you, to shock you, to elicit a response. You don't get any of that, at least I didn't. I was bored fucking stiff watching this. Also thought the main character could not act at all. I mean, she just looked like a cardboard cutout trying to act and display emotion. Channing Tatum, he's probably the only redeemable part of this movie, but the worst part of this movie is you have this annoying guy walking around with a camera the whole time taking pictures saying, "Are you having a good time?" Which ironically, he knows we're not having a good time because this movie is dog shit. So there's just some weird irony to them making you feel abused for having to watch this or something. I don't know. And the worst part of it all is when you get to the end of the movie and you get to the point it could be redeemed, you could have a mysterious twist. Absolutely nothing. Paint by numbers. Everybody knew what this movie was going to be. You don't want to watch it and be subjected to what you are watching because, again, the shock has been removed. So it's like Googling a bad image and then being surprised when you look at it. You know what you were searching for. We all knew what this movie was going to be about. It's not surprising. There's no mystery to it. There's no twist to it. And then they double down on it. The very last scene, they make the character you're supposed to be rooting for, if you've somehow hung on by now, absolutely awful and as bad as him by abusing him back. So this movie, in my opinion, makes no sense, has no purpose, terribly acted. Yeah, absolute ass. I do not understand how anybody liked this film. And it's also kind of telling how many people wrote disgusting comments about this movie. They made it personal. They said I was like an abuser and stuff because I just thought this movie was shit. I don't know. This movie brings out the worst in people. This movie needs to be burned. It's absolutely awful. Coming in ahead of that at number 3 in a movie that, quite frankly, I mean, I should have graded on the curve. It should be below Blink Twice. Blink Twice is really the actual second worst movie. But coming in at number 3 is Carved, the Hulu movie. This movie, not much to say about it. It's about a killer pumpkin. It came out during Hulu's like Halloween special. Again, my issue, like a lot of movies on this, is they just don't do anything interesting with that. Like anything you could possibly think, it's not. It's basically a giant spider in the form of a pumpkin. And it's just not funny. This movie tries to be like super bad level humor, but man, is it a swing and a miss. I don't think I even opened my mouth to chuckle one time in like 2 hours of a movie. So it's not funny. It's not creative. It's not well shot. There's really no actors or actresses, you know. Again, I probably should have put it lower looking back, but it's that bad. I mean, this is a miserable watch, even for a movie that's supposed to be a kind of fun Halloween movie. Yeah, do not watch this one. Carved on Hulu. Awful. Coming in second on the list of garbage movies is a movie called Altered Reality. Now, a lot of people probably don't even know what this movie is because it's very low budget. It kind of got a limited release, but I saw this in a theater, so I feel the need to bring it up. Now, I went and saw this movie on a whim. I believe it was like a Monday night when the theater was dead because I saw Tobin Bell was in it. I was like, oh, Tobin Bell's in it. He's in a lot of decent horror movies. He kind of takes on these weird projects now that he's old. I'll give it a shot. This is probably the worst acted movie I have ever seen in a movie theater. This looks worse than your local like high school play. The main guy who's acting in this guy could not act in adult films. And to be honest, that's kind of the thing with this movie. This movie is just everything in one. It's kind of a time travel movie. It's kind of a movie about like bad pharmaceutical companies. Then you have like a revenge angle, and then you have like an affair angle. It's kind of a Lifetime movie. You have Lance Hendrickson in this, who just does not care at all. This guy is mailing it in. In my opinion, this is probably the most confusing movie I ever went and saw when I was in it, sitting there like, how is this in a movie theater? Like, who bribed somebody to get this released in a movie theater? So yeah, I don't even know how to explain the plot of this one. As I said, you have this guy, he like gets talked to by this old guy who can time travel, and he gives him the rights to this pill that cures all illnesses. But this movie doesn't even know what it's talking about. They say this guy's company would be worth like $1 billion when it will be worth like $1 quadrillion if he could solve all illnesses with one pill. So it's just a stupid movie. It's very low budget. It wants to be like 100 different movies in one. Do not watch this movie. Go look up the reviews, laugh, go watch the trailer, or watch it when you're drunk, because the guy who acts is so bad. I wonder how he's doing these days. I mean, I wonder if he changed careers. This guy might be the worst guy I've ever seen act on the big screen. Coming in as the worst movie of the year is actually what I've decided to be the single worst movie I have ever watched in my life. Maybe this is controversial, but the worst movie I saw this year was Drive-Away Dolls. Now, I have made sure to tell everybody I've ever crossed, oh yeah, you think that movie's bad? Watch Drive-Away Dolls. And they always say, why would I watch a movie that's so bad? And I say, see if you can make it 15 minutes. And nobody's up for the challenge. Because when they look at the poster, when they look at the trailer, they go, that looks like shit. And that's because they're smarter than me. I saw this, it had a Coen brother name attached to it, and I was like, not all of their movies are good, but some of them are okay. Had Margaret Qualley, who at the time was in good standing with me, but after this one, her reputation took a massive plunge until The Substance. And I went into seeing this, and this movie, man, is the most painful movie I have ever sat through a movie theater experience on. I was in a movie theater with, I believe, 35 people. I was last of 2 or 3 standing. 90% of people left this movie within 20 minutes, may I add, and I was damn close. This was like my renaissance moment where if I wasn't a YouTuber, if I didn't make these videos, if I didn't want to share content, I would have left this movie 100%. But I was like, maybe I can review this movie. I was naive at the time. If I knew what I knew now, I would have just left the theater and I would have not reviewed it because it was that bad. You have these 2 girls who rent a car to go to Florida, but they have some luggage from criminals in it. These like bonobo criminals are going to chase them down and try to get the luggage back. But the problem is, this is Coen's humor to a T that is painfully unfunny. I mean, this is a movie that made me feel like I needed to shower after I watched it. It was so unfunny. In the whole plot of this movie, plot, I'm using the term loosely, it's just these 2 girls who are in love and they just fuck the entire movie. That's the whole point of the movie, is them getting laid. So I don't know if you want to call it woke. I don't like that word. But this is the definition of a movie, I would imagine, if it didn't work for you, that makes you question, what are we greenlighting? What is the point of Hollywood? How did this movie get made? Because it's not funny whatsoever. It has no plot in it. The trailer is massively deceiving. It has Matt Damon, I believe, and Pedro Pascal. They're not in this movie for more than 5 minutes combined. And you're just watching this painfully unfunny comedy of Coen's brother humor with Margaret Qualley and the girl she's with going around trying to get laid on the way to Florida, while these 2 bozo criminals in Coen fashion follow them and just tell unfunny joke and unfunny joke and unfunny joke. And it goes on, again, I believe it's about 90 minutes. This movie felt like 10 hours. Also got these very weird stylistic choices where you have these Final Cut Pro transitions where like the screen will slide and it'll like spin into each other like a Cartoon Network show used to do. And they willingly do that, I believe, for like humor or creativity or something, but it just stands out like a sore thumb. There's one movie on this list I will say, do not give this movie a cent. Do not try to disprove my list. You will only cause yourself pain. It is the single worst movie I've ever seen in a theater. Drive-Away Dolls. Pure cinematic torture. So there you have it, guys. That is my list for the 10 worst movies of 2024. Do you agree, disagree? Comment down below. Let me know. I'm going to put a link to my other end of year rankings up here at some point. You want to check those out. As I said, like the video, helps me a lot. Subscribe to the channel. Comment. Love talking movies with you. But I will see you guys in the next ranking soon. Take care. Peace.